Every click, every request, and every interaction with any web server leaves a digital footprint. For millions of websites powered by Microsoft Internal Information Services, or often called as IIS, those footprints are stored in a simple text file. The IIS logs, to a casual observer, they look like a meaningless wall of text. But for a cybersecurity professional, they are a gold mine of information. So today we are going to learn how to read that story. We'll break down what IIS logs are, what they contain, and most importantly, how to use them to connect the dot during the real world cybersecurity investigation. Let's get started. So what exactly are IIS logs? Simply put, an IIS logs is a record of every single request that the web server receives. Think of it as a bouncer logbook for a nightclub. It notes who came to the door, when they arrived, what they asked for, and whether they were let in or turned away. Same way, these logs are generated automatically by the IIS server and are typically stored as a plain text file, usually in a directory like C, inetpub, logs, and the log files. Each website or a service running on the server gets its own folder, making it easy to separate the logs. Let's see what information do they contain actually. Now, the real power of these logs comes from the details they actually capture. Let's look at the standard log entry. It might look intimidating at first, but it is just a series of fields, each with a specific meaning. Now, as you can see, the sample logs on your screen, which is the field date time, source IP, client service method, client server URI-stem, client server URI query, server port. Now, let's break down what exactly these fields are. The very first, which is self explanatory, which is date and time. This is the time stamp of the request, which is a crucial for building a timeline of an attack. If you are investigating any cybersecurity incident, date and time has to be proper and it has to be maintained properly. Next is the CIP. This stands for a client IP address. This is the IP address of the visitor, or let's say potentially the attacker. Now, this is one of the most critical fields that you will have to check whenever you are doing any investigation. Next is CS method. This is the HTTP method that is being used, like get, post. Get is for viewing the page, or post is for submitting any sort of data. Next is cs-uri-stem. This is actually the page or a file that was being requested, like index.html or admin login.php. Next is the SC status. This is the HTTP status code. You'll see 200 for a successful request, 404 for not found, 403 for forbidden, and other HTTP server response code or HTTP status response code, I would say. So, this actually tells you the outcome of the request. Next is the user agent. This identifies the browser or a tool the client used to make the request. Attackers often use specific tools like SQL map or nmap, which can leave a unique signature in actual user agent field. Next is the CS referrer. This tells you the previous page the user was on before they made this request. Now it's a great for tracking a user's path through a site. And the last is the time taken. The time that is in milliseconds that the server took to process the actual request. A very long time might indicate a complex database query which has been triggered, or possibly a SQL injection attack. Let's see, why do we use it actually? So, why do we put ourselves through reading this, spending a lot of time to understand what the logs are saying? See, there are three main reasons why we do it. The very first thing is the troubleshooting. If a part of your website is actually broken, the logs, especially 500 error codes, will point you to the exact page that is failing. It gives you a very good details about what actually went wrong. Second is the performance monitoring. So are the pages are loading very slowly? What is the time taken field can help you identify the bottlenecks of your website. Third, very important is the cybersecurity. This is the big one. For a security analyst, IIS logs are the primary source of truth. They help us to detect suspicious activity, investigate security alerts, and piece together an attacker's action after a breach has occurred. Let's see how does it actually works. The process is quite simple. When your browser sends a request to the IIS server, the server processes that request. So before sending a response back, IIS writes a new line in the log file, filling in all the fields we just discussed with the details of that specific request. It does this for every single image, script, and page load, or creating a complete record of all activity. So that's how it actually logs every request before responding back to the server. Now let's see how to read it a practical example. Let's take the example that you can see on your screen, which is a log entry again, and we'll have to read it like a sentence. So how do we going to uh, say this logs in our language? So this goes like this log tells us on July 22nd, 2025 at 12:45 p.m. A client with the IP address which is 192.168.1.100 that is using a standard Windows or 10 web browser and successfully requested the page which is login.aspx. The request was successful because we can see the status code is 200 and it took the server 156 milliseconds to respond. See, not so scary. When you break it down, it will become an habit. So let's start connecting the dots on a real world case. Okay. So now for the exciting part, let's look at the series of logs from a real world attack scenario and how can we connect the dots. Now imagine we are investigating a potential breach. We filter the logs for a suspicious IP address, which is 203.0.113.55. Now, the very first log basically tells us a series of requests. As you can see on the screen, the very first log actually sees a series of requests from the attacker's IP. If you have noticed, the user agent over here is the Nmap scripting engine. The attacker is scanning for common administrative pages. The first two result in 404, not found error, but the third one, it's a jackpot, which is a 200 OK. The attacker has found a vulnerable file. The next log, if you can see 2 minutes later, a post request is sent to the same page. A post is used to send data to the server. The user agent, if you have observed, has changed to a Python script and the time taken is much longer. This is the attacker uploading a malicious file like a web shell. Third, confirming the web shell. Now, seconds later, the attacker make a get request to a new file and the backdoor.aspx it returns a 200 OK status code. Now this confirms their upload was successful and they now have a web shell on our server. And the final one, which is the command execution, and we see another post request to their web shell, which look closely at the cs-uri query, which is a field that is being written as cmd who am I. Now this is often called as the command injection also. The attacker is using their web shell to execute the commands on our server. From here they can steal the data, pivot to the other systems and cause a serious damage. Just by reading these four lines of text, we have uncovered the entire initial attack chain itself, like reconnaissance, exploitation, persistence, and executions, right? So finally, let's come to the conclusion. As you can see, the IIS logs are an indispensable tool. They provide the raw, unfiltered truth about what's happening on your web server. Learning to read them is a superpower for any defender. So open up any log file, start exploring, and see what stories you can uncover. So far, you have seen how does the IIS logs look like. Now let's try to correlate with the recent vulnerability which was related to the SharePoint for CVE 2025 53770. Let's see how the attackers jump from no login to a full system control in few clicks. So the attack pattern that what it follows is the very first stage is reconnaissance. They mask the internet for any site whichever is replying to the Microsoft SharePoint team service header. Second, the sneak in upload. As you can see on the screen, a forged referrer to the toolpin.aspx that tricks the SharePoint into thinking the user is editing a web part. And what is the result of it? A very small file name called spininstall0.aspx drops into the layout folder with no credentials and no alarm. So once you get the request to the file leaks, the server machine key, which is the cryptographic secret that signs the view state a variable, that 160 byte response is actually the crown jewel for the attacker. 4 is the weaponization state of view state variable. Now, off the box, the attacker feeds the stolen key into YSO serial, which is forging a perfectly signed view state payload that launches the PowerShell SharePoint. And you can see that it is having the valid signature and happily deserializes. And that's where the remote code execution as w3wp.exe has been born. So from here, it's a very classic post exploitation, which is dumping the LSAS and dropping the web shell, pivoting into the AD. And patching alone won't save you. So the stolen machine key keeps working until you rotate it. So rotation of the key is also a very important aspect. Apart from this, hunt for any spin install 0.aspx in your environment to see what if you have any presence of the file. Lastly, the typical logs for this particular CVE has been observed. As you can see on the screen, it is get layout 16 and then spin install 0.aspx. So that is all for today. And now you know how to read the IIS logs and what are the logs associated with the CVE 2025. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what other cybersecurity topics you would like me to cover. Thank you and have a nice day.